Hello, EnderSword here again, this time with a Silver League game featuring our Protoss player Zorbus, who posted this on the TeamLiquid.net strategy forums, and his opponent for today is going to be Factor Jesus, the Zerg player over here on the bottom left-hand side of the screen. Now, Zorbus had posted a few questions along with his replay, and his number one kind of question and observation was, is it really possible to get up to Platinum Diamond just by focusing on actual macro, making sure that you're not getting supply blocked, making sure that you're building probes, etc. And he said that he kind of didn't see how that was actually possible to do. He was also basically looking for what are kind of standard tactics that you can use against each race, and he had often gotten stuck in the mindset of just building up to a fairly maxed army and then only pushing out once you had a really large force, and being very hesitant to go before that, and wondering how can he kind of get over that fear. So we're kind of going to try and address some of those questions as we go along. I'm just kind of going through this game as well for the first time here, just kind of during a break in DreamHack waiting for the next game to start, but figured I might as well make this little video and see what's going on here. So we can see fairly normal openings and stuff so far. He did actually cut a probe to get the gateway down a little faster. I generally like not to do that unless you have a specific reason in the build to do that, or you've scouted something that your opponent is doing that's going to cause you to cut an early probe. Otherwise, I do tend to prefer just sticking with the probes, keeping them going. Also, they're dropping another probe early on. You only lose about 5-10 seconds between each of those, probably like 5 seconds there, if that. But it does really add up over the course of the game, and you want to make sure that you are very steadily producing them out. Also going for the chrono boost there. Good of him to notice that it was at least maxed, so he may be planning to drop the chrono boost on other things, but you do want to always prevent it from getting to 100 energy. We've got an idle probe kind of sitting around there, another one sitting around there. I think he probably misclicked something and reset his rally to the Nexus itself. Also a small supply block there to begin with, so again, maybe missed about another half probe, maybe even a little more than that to that, and obviously the two sitting there idle and the third sitting there idle. It's one thing to make that mistake, it's another to notice two idle and not actually fix the underlying problem. So if you do see that, make sure to check your rally point, because he's losing mining time on each of those, which is going to be the equivalent of an extra probe or two over a period of time. Opting to get some early zealots out here, which is a pretty good thing to be doing. He's going for what looks like kind of a gateway expand later on. If you're going to be getting the zealots out, particularly if you're going to be chrono boosting them and all, and once again our chrono boost is maxed up, he hasn't started warp gate research yet, you do want to be basically hitting that immediately as soon as you can, and chronoing that out. But if we're going to go for a lot of zealots, you want to kind of go poke, do a little pressure against the Zerg, particularly if there's no real indication that he's got speed ready yet. Just kind of go poke at the front. Even if you don't actually do any damage, it kind of forces him to make a few more units as opposed to drones. It may force him to put down an extra spine crawler or something like that if he's a little scared of the pressure. So if you're going to actually militarize fairly early, or particularly if you're going to be chronoing out zealots, you do want to be doing something with them. Oftentimes people are very familiar with the idea that when they have resources, they're supposed to spend those resources. But what people are sometimes less familiar with is if you have a building in existence, that's a resource. The resource of this is that it can produce more units. So right now we're supply blocked again. So we've gotten supply blocked about 2 or 3 times just in the first 6 minutes and 40 seconds of this game. But these are a resource that are then being wasted by being supply blocked, and now being wasted by simply not being used. These can actually produce stuff, and any time that we're not producing something for about 30-40 seconds, it means that we're missing out on that unit. So we're not fully utilizing the resource that's available to us. Another way to look at the resource is that we have an army, and this army is actually a resource. Right now, it's only being used for defense, but could we be getting more use out of this? Could we be sending one of the units out to scout? Could we be taking over this watchtower? Could we be poking at the front here? There's not a lot of defense for the Zerg player at the moment. He's got a spine crawler up, but there's really only these lings out onto the map. There's 6 of them on the entire map, whereas the Protoss army is much stronger than that. So by using this resource of a small army a bit earlier, you can force the Zerg to do things responsibly that they don't want to do. So instead of being scared of moving out, try and get into the mindset that you're actually scared of not moving out. You're scared of what the opponent can do if he's not forced to defend himself. So we're over here defending ourselves reasonably well. He could have a few more units than this, but obviously he's not trying to completely skimp on everything. But our Zerg player basically is. Our Zerg player knows that there's no threat coming because he has this watchtower. He has this watchtower. He's got pretty good overlords moving around the map. He's generally going to see any path towards himself, so he knows he's actually safe. So he's skimping out on everything and deciding not to build defense. So he's taken this drone lead. He's got this base completely up and pretty much fully saturated. Yeah, fully saturated at this point, whereas we haven't taken on these gases yet and things like that. So he's pretty much on a good path, already going up to a lair, adding on upgrades to each of his units and things like that. We should be more scared of not pushing out with this army, not doing any pressure with this army, than we are of leaving it home. So again, we've got the gateways not totally being used all the time. A warping comes in, but there's just a lot of idle time going on. There probably could have been about 3 full more waves of units coming into play. Now behind this, he's obviously gone for the Twilight Council and the Dark Shrine tech, but also taking the robotics facility at the same time. You want to try and stay a bit logically consistent with what you're actually doing. There should be a bit of a cohesion to what's actually going on, and you don't want to be, say, getting all these things at the same time and really making it so that all of them are slow. DTs first coming out at about 11 minutes is quite late. If someone was actually rushing to those, you're going to get them at about 6 minutes, 30 seconds, something in that ballpark. Ones that aren't really rushed to are still going to be there around 8 minutes, 9 minutes. So 11 minutes into the game is very late, plus he's not actually poking with these at all. He's not planning to do anything with the DTs that are coming out. It's possible that this overseer has seen them. I don't think he actually did notice it in this game, but he should have actually been able to see that if he was paying closer attention as they came down the ramp there. But the DTs are just sitting there. You don't tend to make defensive-only DTs. So these should really be moving out on the map and seeing what they can see. In terms of what Zorbus actually knows at the moment, he does have an observer in this area. There's no reason to not go here and see if detection actually exists. He knows there was an overseer, but we actually just killed the thing. So that's not going to be a problem. See if there's a second one on the map. Take this observer all around, see what exists, and know whether or not there's detection there while we have these Dark Templar already on the way over. And spoiler alert, there is no detection here whatsoever, basically, in the entire area. There's not even... There was one overseer on the map, and it is way over here. It's been assaulted a little earlier. It's completely out of position. If these DTs had simply walked across the map, he would have won the game outright right then. And now we have 13 of them sitting at home. I have never, ever seen anything like this before. And he decides, okay, I'm going to turn those into an Archon. Again, based on no particular information. He doesn't know what's going on over in the Zerg base, doesn't know what type of army is being built, doesn't know if there was original detection there or not. So basically he's kind of tossed away a chance to literally just win the game. If 3 of the DTs were sent to each base, really the first 3 should have been sent, period. But once he had like 8 to 13, if he had just sent 3 or 4 to each base, they could have killed the hatchery before any response was done at any location, especially with the only detection way over here. But he is morphing those into Archons, which is a very weird choice. We're adding a lot of gateways on here as he's noticed that the minerals that he's kind of started to stockpile are very, very high. We're adding on the robotics bay, and again, this whole thing is kind of a dead-end tech path for him. He never actually seems to use this. The robotics facility only came out to get 2 observers out onto the map. He made no immortals, made no warp prism. It's not making a Colossus now, even though this is done. Not going to get the upgrade there. Obviously, you shouldn't until you are starting Colossus. But this tech path was kind of just a random dead end. Even the observers that did go out didn't actually scout anything. So there was no real point for them to be out there. They didn't actually see anything important. He didn't send them around the bases, did not take advantage of the information that there was no detection out there or anything of that nature. So when this army comes in, he's really just kind of coming in blind, didn't know that army was about to engage and had half his army trailing off in this direction. There's a bunch of hydras there, which are pretty good against Archons, particularly with the range advantage they have. They do a lot of DPS and can eat through those shields quite quickly. We see those going down quite fast. Force field's finally coming in, but really late, and left a big enough hole that the entire army just kind of got away anyway. So he does retreat off of the creep and heads back home. So he just kind of came in blind there with a big army, but blind. It wasn't really in response to anything. Now that we do have information that, hey, there's hydras out on the map, it's a fairly conventional looking army, no Colossus being started, no immortals being started for the roaches, anything like that. This is still a gateway. I don't know if it's been like that the whole time, or did he accidentally put it back? I don't know what he did. That is odd. I could swear that was a warp gate before. But still just going for this, I'm going to warp in DTs to go into Archons. Also, DTs are not really the most efficient way to do this in the first place. They take 125, 125, as opposed to the 50, 150 from the High Templar. So you're essentially getting the Archon out each time for like 100 resources more than you really have to pay for it. It's less gas, it's 50 less gas, but then it ends up being a lot more minerals. So it's a fairly inefficient way to do it. It's like 150 more minerals. While it's currently not Protoss's problem that minerals are stockpiled up like crazy anyway, we've got full chrono boost on all these nexus. You can use chrono boost to speed up your warp gates. Not that that's really even an issue now. He's got some warp gates that still aren't even on their cooldown, so some of them aren't being used fully. He does come in, the DTs, he finally realizes maybe that there is no detection out there. That's really the only way that he ultimately ends up winning this little battle, is DTs coming in. Factor Jesus not too happy with that, although he saw DTs the first time. So I don't know why he didn't respond to this. He has the ability to make overseers, but never really did it. Didn't get a single spore crawler down or anything like that. So he really should have known better. But look at how quickly the DTs are able to take out one of these hatcheries. If he had just done this about 9 minutes ago when he first had the DTs out, he could have completely taken out the main base, could have completely taken out the natural, anything like that. They do just kind of make short work of the buildings, especially if there is no detection around to actually stop them. And just look how slow it is for detection to finally come out. There it is now, and finally traps these in the middle, but there's so many of them, they still end up doing a whole bunch of damage because it's just a fairly large army. traps them with his drones, but ends up just losing a lot of drones to it, loses one of the infestors to it, and so on. And we're still sticking with the same strategy here, that instead of switching into another type of technology, we're just going to continue on with this fairly inefficient usage of Zealots and Dark Templar to morph directly into Archons, which are just not, they're a great unit, but they're just not a cost-efficient unit. The whole idea of them is when you get the Archon, you should have already gotten some use out of the DT unit or the High Templar unit. So usually you'd make your High Templar get some use out of the Storm, and then it can be morphed into an Archon with another High Templar. If you're just going straight to the Archons, then it tends to be a lot less cost efficient. You're not getting that initial goodness out of the original unit. You're not actually taking advantage of the cloak at any point in this game before going into the Archon mode there. Does get his third base attacked. I think the Zerg thinks the situation is a bit more desperate than it is, because he is pulling drones along with this. I don't think he had to do that. I don't think there's any real need to that. Doesn't really provide much of a buffer, particularly knowing that you are facing an Archon army. There's no real reason to do that. He ends up with his forces split up in two different groups. The Roaches are a bit better in this case when they are kind of massed together and can kind of be one-shotting these Archons down. As big as they are, they're really not great against Roaches. So that attack could have been handled a lot better. Overall, we see the Chrono Boost still not being used here. Nothing coming out of the Robo. Nothing in terms of Immortals. No switch being made into, say, anti-air or anything like that. Even though at this point he is aware. Actually, he never did look. That is strange. I just assumed that when killing the Hive here, he would have been aware of the Spire and the Greater Spire. However, he did certainly see Corruptors out onto the map, so he should know that a Broodlord tech is probably on its way. So you may want to put a little less into, say, the Zealots, a little more into some anti-air, Stalkers, Blink Stalkers, something like that, out onto the map to deal with that in transitioning into Stargates, but instead just kind of remaxes on the Zealot Archon army. At this point, he does have enough of an advantage. He can probably just push with a near-maxed army of kind of any composition. However, again, we're stuck at this 150, but supply blocked again. There's nothing coming out to help reinforce these armies. On each of the major pushes so far, there's been no reinforcements with it. He's just going with whatever he's got. We've got a couple probes up here, which I think were just accidentally caught up with the force. They're not actually here to throw down pylons, but they could have definitely done so here. They could have done so in the mid-ground and actually allowed us to reinforce this army. So instead of that, we again have kind of the split up going on. You may have seen that this was a fairly small force and decided not to... decided just that the split up was okay, but with a couple Broodlords out there, I probably would have wanted to deal with that in its entirety first. Zealots obviously going to town here, ripping everything apart. This is going to be a dominating army. Had a rally point out kind of beyond everything, so it's just kind of coming back now. And they just make such a short work of those Archons. If he was microing the Hydras a little more, probably could have done a lot more damage there. But you can see, even with that overwhelming force coming in, we're down to really only this much. If there was slightly better play by the Zerg player, that could have been a little more trouble, and you would want to reinforce. Yes, there is this group obviously wreaking havoc over here, and he was going to take that base out as well. So the Zerg was pretty much down and out, but it could have been handled a lot stronger, a lot better than that. The Warp-ins had to be all the way back at home, finally switching into Stalkers at this point. So overall in this game, obviously the Protoss player does win it. However, he could have won it around 11 minutes into the game as opposed to 26 minutes into the game. So you don't want to be scared to push out with those things. You're massing up DTs to not even use the DTs at all as DTs as cloaked units to go take a look out onto the map. Really missing a big opportunity there. At the worst case scenario, you kind of run in with them, see detection around, and back your way out. At the time, he had an observer in the area that could have pre-scouted out whether or not detection was even there before fully committing his DT. So he should have sent them in on the way, could have ended the game right at that moment. There was a lot of dead-end tech path, so the robotics bay turned out to be literally for nothing. The choice of DTs over the High Templar, just more costly than it actually needed to be, although at this point he was floating so much extra money anyway throughout the course of that game that I don't know that it made a lot of difference. But that of course brings us to the idea that there wasn't enough macro out on this map. Yes, he's got 9 gateways, but off 3 bases, you're going to want that to be more like 12 to 15 gateways, probably even more than that, given that he wasn't warping in on a steady basis and wasn't reinforcing. When he launched an attack, there would tend to be a long delay before a reinforcement wave actually was even warped in, and even in those cases it was warped in back at home as opposed to in the front line. So it wasn't actually reinforcement so much, it was replacement for the next wave of attack later on. So pretty bad macro problems there. The macro mechanic of the chrono boost not being used hardly at all, really only in about the first 6 to 8 minutes of the game was this being used in any way. You're just missing out so much to have all of it banked up. You can get things out of your building so much faster. You can chrono boost all your warp gates, just constantly be doing that. You'll get things out so much quicker. You can obviously continue to chrono boost your probes, chrono boost all your tech. One major thing missing in this game was that not a single upgrade ever went down for the Protoss player. So there was kind of a scary point where a 2-2 army out of a Zerg player can be just incredibly scary. Roaches upgrade so well. They already start with an armor, so to add +2 to them, they get so much extra damage from the attacks. The Hydras just turn into little machine guns that can completely plow through the Archons, particularly without upgraded shields or attacks. Attacks are so good on the Archons. They do good against biological anyway, but they just have great improvement when you do upgrade the attack. In terms of Zealots, just going to 1-1 or just going to +1 attack makes you 2-shot lings instead of 3-shot them. So it's usually a good idea to get some of those things fairly early. There becomes a point that these are just really ineffective against the opponent once they do have a lot of armor, particularly since the Zealot swings actually count as 2 different attacks. So all of a sudden you've got 2 swings of 8, which usually would do 16, now doing 10. So you're actually doing 10 damage instead of 16 against +2 roaches, which is just obviously not good. It's way more than it seems. The armor should only be shielding 2 more, but in reality you end up losing like 6 because we're not keeping the upgrades going. So it really is a case where macro can overrun your opponent, and you should focus a lot more on that. I hope this was helpful, and I hope it also showed some of the just logical decision-making type things. That macro in probes and pylons and stuff, they don't have to be accompanied by like a specific build order, like this build order is so awesome. Don't worry about that until later, but it still has to be some sort of logical build order. It still has to be a logical plan. It has to be, it can't be like, I'm going to make 3 bases and make nothing but phoenixes and carriers. Well, that's just not a good logical plan to do. But as long as it's just a basic, I'm going to make a bunch of gateway units, tech up to one thing, push, and if my economy is better, I'm going to win, that's going to be fine each time. So I hope that does help. Thanks for watching, guys.